I, I was quite enjoying not working for a while. It was the first time I hadn't worked in a very long time, and we were learning Hebrew, and our first grandchild was born, so it was a wonderful time. But I was actually inspired by not just by the teachers, but by my fellow students to seriously think about working as a tour guide. And then it became just the natural thing. I realized actually perhaps it was something I always was going to do. And when you love something, you can you can do better at it. You can do well at it. So
That's what I tell my clients all the
it's
time.
it's very good. If you love something, you're likely to be good at it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Second Chapter Careers. Today, I have David Parry. He's going to be sharing with us his unique career journey and as well as an insight into an industry we haven't covered yet. So I'm really excited to hear the story with you and to share it with anyone who might be interested. Welcome, David.
Thanks very much, Sari.
You want to start by telling us how you started your career, where you're from, where you are
Sure,
now?
sure, sure. So I'm from Australia. I was born in Sydney, met my wife. I studied in Sydney. We had our children, we had our family, four wonderful children. I studied law at Sydney University. I also did an arts degree there. And then I went on to do a master's in Oxford, the equivalent of a master's. And I started a fairly traditional start to a legal career in Australia. I was a lawyer in a city firm in Sydney. And then I went out on my own as what they call a barrister. So in Australia, like in the UK, it's a split profession. You decide whether you want to practice like a normal lawyer, doing mostly office work, or do you want to work in courts? And I wanted to work in courts. And so I became a barrister. And then I was very lucky. I just happened to stumble into an area of law that I loved, which was planning and development and environmental law. It wasn't something I studied or even thought about, but it just happened to be that there was work where I was. And bit by bit, I got to do it, and I loved it. And it sort of shaped the rest of my career. What I loved about it was that it's very forward looking. It's solution focused. Most lawyers will fight and talk about things that happened in the past, solving or attributing blame for things that happened in the past. Whereas the kind of work that I did was building something or moving forward. And I really enjoyed that. And then sort of my first career change, although it was perhaps a bit more normal or traditional career change than my next career change, was that there was an opportunity in a different part of Australia, in a different state of Australia, to become part of a tribunal that they were setting up, like a court, but more informal. And it had a number of different areas that it was taking over work from courts, where the courts weren't doing it very well. It was specialist decision making under new types of laws, which was to do with planning and development, town planning and environmental types of cases, which was my area. But there were lots of other areas they brought together. And very fortunately, at a relatively young age, younger than I would have gotten the opportunity in my home state, I got the opportunity to become what they called a senior member, which was really a kind of like a specialist magistrate with no tenure, but a 5-year government appointment. And my job was to set up the development and resources area of this tribunal. So we did mostly appeals against government decisions to do with planning and development and local government types of matters. And that was my area. And I loved that. So that was the first career change. And it did involve, it's like the same distance as going across the United States from one side
Wow.
of the country to the other. There's not that much in the center of Australia as in the United States, a lot of desert, but it's a big distance, and we left family behind. But it seemed like a great career move. It seemed like a really great personal move. My wife and I were both thinking about a lifestyle change. I was working very hard because I was working for myself, and I couldn't really say no to anything. So
Right.
I worked 6 days a week, and meanwhile we had 4 young children. So this seemed like it seemed like a really great career opportunity, but it also seemed like a great personal opportunity. And it really was. It was worked out in both of those ways. I certainly spent a lot more time being with my kids while they were growing up, which was wonderful. But also professionally, it was a fantastic opportunity because I got to do something that at my age, my stage of a legal career, generally you don't. And it was also something very new. It was a new institution. It was being set up by a guy who was a Supreme Court judge, but he really had a great vision for what he wanted to create. He wanted to be able to give justice to people who normally would only ever deal with one particular area, and this would be their only exposure to the legal system, and to do it in a way that's quick and relatively cost-free. And we thought informal, probably to them was incredibly intimidating, but we thought we really made an effort to make it as informal as possible, and also to look at different ways of resolving disputes other than the traditional, a decision, someone wins, someone loses. And so I got in that job to really experiment with different types of dispute resolution, which was really, as I say, it was an incredible opportunity. I knew, I thought it would be a once in a career opportunity, and it really was. It was fantastic. I had a very supportive boss, a really incredible group of people that we were all at the ground floor setting something up, and we knew it was something special. To say that the leaders of this institution gave a lot of flexibility to the rest of us, and it was also my first and really probably only experience managing people. And I had no formal training for that, but I really enjoyed working with people in a team, and we were creating something new. So that was uh, my my career as what was called the head of this stream of the tribunal. And then the next twist in my career was that I happened to have done a good job. So it was like a 5-year government appointment. So it had security for that 5 years. And I was reappointed once in that role. But then the structure of this tribunal was that there's a Supreme Court judge who's the full-time president, like on a secondment, but a full-time president for 5 years. There are two deputy presidents, as they're called, who assist the president, who are district court judges. So in Australia, there's like in Israel and in the States as well, it's really a 3-tiered system. There's both a federal system and a state system, and I was in the state system. And I was very fortunate to be appointed as a judge of the middle level court, the district court, basically to be seconded back to this tribunal as a deputy president. And in that role, I oversaw still the area that I was involved in setting up originally, but also I did lots of other work in the tribunal, and it was a wonderful experience. I was technically, in fact, more than technically, I was also a district court judge. And at one stage, I was not reappointed as a deputy president of this, what is called the State Administrative Tribunal. And because I wasn't reappointed, I went back to what was meant to be my day job, which was as a judge of the district court. And I spent about 16 months working as a full-time judge in the district court in Western Australia. I can talk about that. It was also a really interesting experience,
I
partly
would
because it
love
wasn't
to hear
expected.
about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
What kind of cases did you see there?
okay, so there it was quite different from what I had worked in my career and what I had done initially by that stage, around 11 years in the tribunal as a kind of as a specialist magistrate and then as a judge. So the district court in Western Australia, which is the state where I lived and worked, technically it does both civil and criminal work. So a mixture of work. Civil cases, people taking proceedings against each other for things like, well, motor vehicle collisions. More likely it was more serious cases because there was a minimum threshold, financial threshold. But most of the work had become over the years criminal cases. So effectively, it was all the serious criminal cases in the state except for murder. That was really there was a magistrates court that dealt with more, relatively speaking, but still serious criminal cases, and really everything else other than the very, very serious cases of murder and manslaughter were dealt with by the district court. And it's a court that works with juries, whereas in Australia, criminal cases often involve juries, but not in the work that I used to do. So it was an introduction to me of working with juries as well, which I had no background with. So I had a steep learning curve of both learning criminal law on the job, trying not to look too stupid, and also working with juries. But I actually really loved the experience of working with juries. The criminal work was for a mild Jewish boy who liked to deal with planning disputes, things to do with land, where no one really was seriously hurt at the end of the cases. Someone might have been financially not happy with the outcome, or the community may not have been happy with an outcome of a planning case, but at the end of the day, it wasn't criminal. So for me, I found that challenging. Just the subject matter of the cases. There was a lot of terrible things that people did to each other, which to the wider world, thank God, don't get exposed to. Uh,
So I'll
and
tell you,
and it was
since something I haven't mentioned here, and since we just met, you wouldn't know about me.
yes,
So my father is a criminal defense attorney.
right,
I wouldn't necessarily call him a mild-mannered Jewish
right,
lawyer, but I spent a lot of time working in his office and
yes,
seeing that really difficult side of humanity.
yes,
So when you talk about those things, I can relate to it on a level that I think probably most listeners won't. And also the other side, he used to be a prosecutor and now he's a defense attorney.
yes,
So I've spent pretty much my entire adult life hearing about how so many people do these terrible things because of their terrible circumstances. And
yes.
there are terrible people for sure, but I have this maybe liberal soft spot for a
Look,
lot of people.
everybody has a story. And particular,
Yeah.
I came into it with absolutely no preconceptions, because I didn't expect ever to do criminal work, and certainly not as a judge, presiding in jury trials. So I can say I was completely objective about the whole area, and I had incredible respect for talking about like your dad, the people that were involved, both defense and prosecutors, were really excellent and professional. And I think partly they realized I had been a judge by that stage, or at least a judicial officer for over 10 years. So I did know how to conduct things. And so that was fine. But the area was completely new to me, and people were extremely helpful. But also I just had really great respect for the professionalism of people, of the practitioners. And I also had a lot of respect for the jury system, which is something I really didn't expect. As somebody who hadn't worked with juries before, and as a professional lawyer and then as a judge, I would have thought, well, why don't you let the experts decide? A judge is an expert, and they have the training and experience. But I had incredible respect for the juries that I worked with. I found most overwhelmingly incredibly conscientious and decent people.
I
Um,
love that.
yeah, and I say completely objectively, I didn't have one case where I would have found a person not guilty if I was deciding guilt or innocence, and the jury found them guilty. I did have a couple of cases where a jury found someone who I thought was guilty,
Oh,
not guilty, because they were exercising. Just it was
the
clear to me
legal
in
system.
real time. They were exercising just community justice. I think they could see their own kids doing something stupid, which had technically criminal consequences, but they exercised the common sense of the community, and actually, so I became a fan. I thought it was an interesting experience, and something which I came to really objectively. So I did that and even, I mean, the work, I say, it was challenging. The facts of it, some of the cases were challenging, but it was a tremendous privilege to do that work as well. I felt I was being a bit wasted, because my area of expertise by that stage, over 20 years as a lawyer and then as a judicial officer, was to do with administrative law, particularly planning, but also for the 5 years before I went to the district court, I was a deputy president of this state administrative tribunal. And the work was I mentioned my particular area of interest that I started off doing, but it does all sorts of things. So as varied as disputes about building, disputes about condominium complexes, people living together in that sort of situation, the area of planning and development and resources issues that I originally started doing, but also medical cases, adult guardianship, people who the question whether they have capacity to make their own decisions, regulating lots of different professions. So it's a really broad area that was brought together into this one tribunal. And I did all of that kind of work, which I loved. So it was all, so I had an incredibly blessed career.
Sounds like.
Yeah, really, I really did. And I could have kept going in that career. I had a tenured position for another 15 years when I resigned. Retired. What caused the change was the dream to come to Israel. I always felt it was part of my life destiny. That was really something. Even as a child, I hadn't been to Israel, but I grew up in a secular but proudly Jewish home. But even when I hadn't been to Israel, somehow there was this. It was some bright star in my life. And then through my adulthood, I met my wife when we came as students originally, and we'd come back several times. We'd been on a religious journey from the time we thought about having children and became more observant. And so we saw Israel not just from an incredible, as a Jewish national homeland, but also from a religious Dati Leumi perspective. Um, so it had always been part of my life, but it became increasingly something that I knew I wanted to be part of at some stage. Then I was blessed to get the opportunity to be a judge, and that delayed the journey, but it also provided our practical aliyah in that I knew that I could retire after. In my case, I had to get to the age of 55, which was the young retirement age. I happened to be in a state where you could retire at 55 from the bench as long as you'd been a judge for 10 years. And I'd been a judge for over 10 years. I think they're probably going to get rid of that loophole now that I've done it. It was brought in, actually, interestingly, for somebody who was a very clever guy who was appointed to the Supreme Court in Western Australia decades ago. And he was appointed as a judge, I think in his early 40s. And he said, I don't know if I'm going to do this for a whole lifetime. And they changed the law to enable him to retire. Of course, he never retired, as in reached the compulsory retirement age.
Yeah.
And most judges would never. When I told people that I was retiring, honestly couldn't believe it. But my
Because
colleague,
it's such a great job, or why?
no one. Why would you give up? It's an incredibly responsible job. It's the culmination of a person's career. It's the pinnacle of what people dream that they would do, and it is an incredible privilege to resolve people's disputes. Really, I was very conscious of this, that you are the embodiment of the legal system to people. Very often it's the only time they'll ever deal with anybody in the legal system. And their one experience of you will color their whole perception of the system of law and the administration of justice. That's a really amazing position to be in. And I got to, make a difference to people's lives. So it's an incredible job. And also, as I was saying before, I happen to be very lucky in my career that I was involved in setting something up from the beginning and to experiment with different ways of resolving disputes and to do things quicker and better and give people a better experience. So for all of those reasons, I loved it. And people were really scratching their heads as to why anyone would give up such a responsible position when they had tenure and 15 years to go. It just, for me and my wife, was a joint decision. It was something that we were talking about for a long time. It was just where we needed to be. And in the meantime, our 4 children all made Aliyah. So it was
That's beautiful.
partly to be together as a family. We had this 10 or 12 year period where the family was slowly splitting up, and we couldn't say anything about it because it was the best thing, because we were so very proud of everybody to
Right.
come and make a contribution. So they grew up in a Zionist household. So it wasn't a surprise, but it was a surprise when particularly our eldest daughter decided to come. She came for a gap year and then came back for a short time. And we thought that she would go to university in Australia in her native language. It's much easier. She knows all the
Mhm.
everything, but her heart was here, and I instantly understood, and we were both incredibly proud of her. They were our shlichim. And so it was always part of our destiny. And
So
so for me, there wasn't a question, but for, as I say, the world around me was
right.
stunned and surprised.
So how long did you plan that retirement, let's say, or that transition? Did you
Yeah.
say at 50, okay, when I hit retirement age at 55, we're out of here? Or did you hit 54 and a half and you said, okay, now we're there?
No, look, it really was from from the time I was appointed as a judge, I knew that there was a practical, as I was saying, a practical aliyah. We're very blessed that there's a pension associated with that job, and it would have been more had I stayed longer. We're incredibly blessed to be in the position we are because of that job. So it really was. Had there was a possibility of a one further career advancement within that system, which may have happened but didn't happen. And obviously it was Bashert that shouldn't happen then, so that we could come at an earlier age to Israel, and both my wife and I be blessed with one further career possibility. So putting that aside, it really was something that we were talking about and thinking about, and not really planning. It was just something that was always going to happen. And as I got towards that time, I knew that really that it will be that there's no point in staying longer. Our heart and our destiny was in Israel, and by that stage, all of our children were here. Um,
Beautiful.
so there wasn't any.
So beautiful. I'm so happy that you made it here. I'm
Yeah,
happy for them. As speaking as someone who has raised children without grandparents in the country, I'm
yeah,
happy for you that you
yeah.
got to reunite with your children and your grandchildren. Were
Right.
you thinking in those years, or maybe the end of those years, what am I going to do when I get to Israel? How did you choose your next big step?
Yes, I mean, yes, because it's a enormous opportunity, but it's also daunting because I
Very.
left something that I was really enjoyed, and I'd reached a high level, was good at it, I think, and enjoyed it very much. And then the thought of starting again, I really realized that we went to Ulpan, as you do as an
Mhm.
Oleg Adash, and we've got to the level of something perhaps about kindergarten Hebrew. We speak to our granddaughter, and we're definitely the same level. But you really do take um, I mean, in Hebrew, it's sort of that it's a sort of loss of status.
Yeah.
It really is. You do lose. It is I should say, it is. As I said before, it really is the culmination of my life. It's not saying putting it too highly to say that I really felt that the mission of my life was to get here and to facilitate
Wow.
my children coming to Israel. And I sort of think of us as the bridge in that process. But fortunately, we're young enough to have a life here as well. So it was realizing that really Hebrew will never be at the level to be able to work anywhere near the kind of professional work that I was either my wife or myself were doing.
Plus, this legal system isn't transferable
Yes,
as
no,
many careers are. So you
that's so
must
true.
have known you're not rolling it over.
No, that's very
Yeah.
true. And I mean, I didn't say earlier, but it is true. We had a big discussion about the time that we'd moved across Australia and this career opportunity came to be involved in setting up the tribunal. We really had a serious discussion about making Aliyah at that time. We had 4 young children. We were in our um, we're 36, mid 30s, but one of the real concerns was that I would need to requalify, and so much of law is about language, and which might
Mhm.
sound odd, but really a lot of my work was about interpreting and applying the English language in different contexts. So
I know.
so exactly. So it is something that is people have done it, and kol hakavod. I have such respect for lawyers who converted their degrees from coming from Anglo countries, Israel. It can be done, but it never quite happened for me. So that was never going to be something practical. But I had heard years and years ago from friends in Israel about the tour guiding course. I mean, I always loved travel, and we'd been to Israel many times, and sometimes we'd get a tour guide, and they were generally fantastic. So that was always something in my mind, and I heard from people that the course itself is something brilliant, and it really is. In Israel, becoming a Moreh Derech it's we tell people that national parks and other places where I go in with people, Moreh Derech, oh, they say the qualifications. It's it's something serious here because people love
I
the
heard
country.
it's quite intense.
But the course itself is quite, I love the course, but it is quite intense. It used to be a 2-year course, which I think was the right, that's how long it should be. And in that
Okay.
2 years, there were lectures, but there's also 80 tours over the
Oh.
course of the 2 years. At some point, they reduced that to a year and a half. This is very Israeli to try and do things quicker and better and faster. And then it worked at a year and a half. So some bright person said, let's do it in a year.
Yeah.
It turned out that I was the last of 3 years in which they experimented with a year. It really was far too fast. They reduced
Wow.
the number of tours from 80 to 60, but then they expected us to be able to go to some of these places on our own, which was a joy for me. But really, it's a very intense year. Apart from the tours, there's lectures, and because they've reduced it to 1 year, now it's a little longer again. Some of it is now online, so in addition to face to face. So yes, it is intensive, but I found that incredible. I always had a fascination for the history of this land. I mean, not just modern history of Israel, but the ancient history of Israel. And always had an interest in, including professionally because of the planning law work that I did, about geography and topography and all that sort of thing. But there was so much more things that I really wouldn't have thought I'd be interested in, like rocks. It's not the topic that would be the first in my mind. But the geology that we studied was all about Israel, all about the land of Israel. So everything adds up. The the I found this fascinating. The geology results in the topography, and the topography results in the way people moved and trade routes, and the journey, including the journey out of Africa, went through the land of Israel. And then every civilization in this part of the world has had an interest in the land of Israel. So it all builds one on the other. And I found all of that fascinating. It was genuinely one of the best, probably the most enjoyable professional education I've ever had, and actually probably one of the best professional courses I ever did, was the tour
Where
guiding.
did you do the course?
So I did it as it's part of the University of Haifa, but I did it in English. It's also an incredible, machad to be able to do it, to for me particularly, to study in English. I really couldn't have done it in Hebrew. It's
Okay.
in English, it's complicated. The history and the terminology, the archaeology, all of that. So I was able to do it in English at the campus of the School of Tourism of the University of Haifa in Tel Aviv. And it was a wonderful experience. Really fantastic. Great teachers, great tours.
I'm so glad for you. I have two questions. Firstly, I would love to hear, and I think maybe others would love to hear, how it was to be a student after so many years of not being a student. I think a lot of people are worried about, does my brain work the same way? Can I do exams the same way? That's the first question. And the second question is, can you explain how the course works and how the testing works for people who may be interested in taking that course so
Sure.
that they can have some insights into that?
Sure. I mean, that's an excellent question. It's just something I didn't really give a lot of thought to that about being a student again. For me, it certainly was the first exam I took there was the first exam in 35 years. So I did wonder with whether the brain would work, but I love, when you love something, you can do it. And I did have a pretty good, I've been a student of history for my own interest for a long time. And I had a pretty good idea of the general timeline of the land of Israel. But there's so much I obviously didn't
Of
know.
course.
And I loved the learning journey. And I really did enjoy being in a class with people. The last time I was in a class with people was when I did my master's, and that was a very long time ago. And it was very competitive. So we made friends, and I really enjoyed my university time. But it was entirely different story, because when I started doing the course, I was in two minds as to whether I actually wanted to work. I was quite enjoying not working for a while. It was the first time I hadn't worked in a very long time, and we were learning Hebrew, and our first grandchild was born, so it was a wonderful time. But I was actually inspired by not just by the teachers, but by my fellow students, to seriously think about working as a tour guide. And then it became just the natural thing. I realized actually perhaps it was something I always was going to do. And I
Wow.
realized that it dawned on me over time, partly through the encouragement of my fellow students, that the skills that I had, which I just took for granted, the professional skills that I developed just on the job over these careers that we've been talking about, were actually incredibly suited to communicating with people, to showing people things that I found interesting. And I also realized just from my friends in the class that they found my perspectives interesting because they were a product of all of the experiences that we've been talking about. So I found it very inspiring. I found it inspiring, and I found my colleagues to be really supportive, and I could help. So we helped each other in different ways. They gave me that inspiration and found what I was saying interesting, and that validated for myself that this actually is something that I should do professionally. And it was a very supportive class that there really was people helping each other. Everybody had different skills. I think I was the oldest,
Okay.
but it was on the whole, there were a few people in their 20s, but on the whole, it was sort of the middle sort of, probably average ages in the 30s. And people came from really interesting backgrounds. Although it was in English, a lot had been in Israel for quite some time. We had a number of people who were teachers, educators in different ways, working with youth groups in the past and with youth coming to Israel on programs. We had a tour guide from her former country. We had people just interested in history. Everybody loved travel. We bonded over that. And because it was such an intense experience, really was, it really, really an incredibly supportive environment, and everybody contributed. So that was the good side. The exams were, it's a process, doing a course and an exam as part of the course, and there were two during the year, and then there was the state licensing exam. It's a process. The teachers were, my course coordinator was fantastic. Is fantastic. She's now teaching another course, the subsequent course. And in fact, they kindly invited me to go and present a class on
Oh, it's lovely.
the exam, or not so much at the moment on the exam, but how to write for the purposes of preparing yourself during the year. And also that's part of actually how to do the exam. But so to get to your other question about the testing and how does the process go, it isn't intense and it is demanding. They told us at the beginning, and there was an actual interview to get into the course, which was used to be doing interviews for people wanting jobs, and it was like, and it's been a very long time since I sat in an interview wanting something, and we had three very experienced tour guides asking me questions. But in the course itself, so from the very beginning, they tell you that really you're being prepared to pass an exam. There are two in the course itself, and in both there's a practical and they call it theoretical, but a written exam. So the written exam you do in the course, there's a midterm and then a final exam. And then you need to pass each stage, including the final exam, pass the course in order to be eligible to sit the state licensing exam. So at each of these three stages, the midterm, the final course exam, and the state licensing exam, it has the same format. So basically there's two parts to it. There's a knowledge component, which changed over time, but by the time I did it, was worth 40% of the written exam, and it is quite daunting. It's quite a process that you get. You have to answer 80 questions out of 90 in an hour and a half. They are either half a short answer, so a word or a phrase, and half are multiple choice, and that's in itself is quite a process to go through. But
Very.
that's the first part. Then they give you a half-hour break, and then you sit back for another, it depends, it's 3 or 4 hours.
Oh
Most
my God.
people, I had 4 hours, partly because I was an Ole Chadash, and partly because I was over 55. But most people get, it seems, they get over 3 hours because of various reasons. And in that longer time, you have a choice of 3 or 4 tours, and you write a tour as though you're presenting a tour, but you're doing it in an exam format. So,
Wow.
so the choices might be, you have a Christian group who want to visit the Galil, or a mixed religious group of professionals who are coming for a course and want to spend a day in Jerusalem and see a mosaic of different faiths. And so you choose the one of these 3 or 4 topics, and then you write an itinerary, a very detailed itinerary of a full day. They normally will tell you where you start and where and when you finish. And then you need to write. In my case, it was a total of 6, what they call guiding units, which are basically like presenting a bit of guiding, but it's obviously it's theoretical because you're doing it in writing. But you need to say, you're standing here, or the group is standing in a certain place. They're looking at this. You're standing next to them. You need to go through what you would be guiding them and what you would be using, what guiding aids you would be using, either there or things you would bring with you. So it is a process, and it's not guaranteed to pass. Our class, I have to say, had quite a good thankfully pass rate, but previous courses in English have not fared so well in the first time they did it, because it is actually a very demanding and daunting process. But
Sounds like.
that's the theoretical. That's the theoretical, and there's an oral exam as well, which is basically doing a half-hour tour.
Wow, I'm kind of scared just listening about it, but people I know who
No,
have done it are so happy.
yeah. Yeah, well, really one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And the people who have done it, I really realize why they say it's a process. But for me, it was really, I loved every aspect of it. And when you love something, you can do better at it. You can do well at it. So
That's what I tell my clients all the
it's
time.
it's very good. If you love something, you're likely to be good at it.
Exactly.
So,
Okay, so I think the question that is scratching in my mind right now is why or how did you come to a decision of such an unstable career? Like you came in the post-COVID era and we went straight into a war.
yes.
So clearly, tourism it's not a sure thing. You could have done something much more stable.
No, that is very true. Look, I'm in a blessed position because I do have a pension from my previous career. So, it's a set income, but we're very, very blessed to have that. It is a very tough thing to be these tour guide as your main profession. And I know many tour guides who are doing lots of different things at the moment, but they still love guiding, and they're waiting for the opportunity. I think there are opportunities in Israel at the moment. They're not as easy as they used to be, and hopefully things
Hopefully.
will get back to the way they were. It's been a very, very tough time, as you're saying, exactly. Whenever statistics are quoted in tourism, always talk about 2019. That was the
Right.
golden year, because it happened to just be before Corona. And then the last 3 years have just been very difficult. Having said that, there really is an incredible pent-up demand to come to Israel. There are, we saw that just in the can't now remember between which wars we're talking now. It's just
They all blur.
you lose track. You really
Yeah.
lose track. But there was a time between wars, I think it was after the 12-day war, that there really was suddenly the floodgates opened, the American airlines were coming, and there were large groups of Christian tourists who really wanted to come and were suddenly coming. Unfortunately, a lot of them have stopped because of the airlines stopping. But there is such demand. Israel has such an incredibly special country that I really do think that once things return to semi-normalcy, we'll be surprised and we'll be stunned at how many people want to come.
I hope so. I see it already that people want to, but they can't.
Yes, it's
Just
very, very difficult. It is very difficult. Once the airlines start again, I think that there will be there is such pent up demand to come to Israel, and it is such a unique country. I mean, uh, there should be there should be even more. As I was saying before, people go back to the statistics of 2019. I think there were 4.5 million tourists in Israel, and that's sort of the maximum. But there should be double that. It is unique. And has such incredible things to offer. But in the meantime, I mean, there are tour guides here are working with locals. There's incredible domestic tourism in Israel. People love to travel. From my own background, knowing my own friends who have been on a similar journey to me, Olim, there is a thirst to see the country and a source of tourism. So
absolutely.
yes, you're right. It's not. It seems like a crazy decision to become a tour guide. Having said that, all the people in my course really would like to be professional tour guides. and they would all make excellent tour guides for different groups and different interests. And from what I understand, even the year that started now, the group that I'm going to be speaking to in a couple of weeks, it's more. There are more people doing it now. And when I did the exams, the state licensing exam, there was something like 500 or 600 people in the room, all wanting to be tour guides. There's confidence there, but there's something to be confident about because it's an incredible country and it's got such
Absolutely.
such amazing things to offer, such depth. I mean, there's no other place like it. There's no other place that's the land of the Bible. There's no other place that
Agree.
was the crossroads of the world from the beginning. You just have to the second that anybody moves 2 meters in Israel, they find some incredible archaeological site that remains to be discovered. No, I really think that while it's not easy for someone to be a full-time professional tour guide, and I've seen even the people who I admire incredibly, who've been doing it for many years, and who I had as teachers, and people I've seen presenting videos of sites, they're having trouble, but uh, they love what they do so much, and they have such an incredible story to tell here in Israel that I really do feel confident that just the second we have people, and they will come, that there'll be amazing demand for tour guides and generally to tour Israel.
I
So
sure hope so.
yeah, no, I think it will happen.
I'll just end with a final question. What is your favorite place to take people to in Israel?
So hard because all fabulous. I mean, the thing to say is Jerusalem, of course, because Jerusalem is just beyond description. It really is the center of the world for more than half the people on the planet. That's that's the truth. There's no other place in the world like that. Whatever you look at in Jerusalem is special and incredible. I happen to also I live in the north and I love the Golan. I just took a group to the Golan and the Galil and seeing it through people's eyes, people who'd been to these places, but seeing it explained in a different way, and some places they just never gotten to. It is just an incredibly beautiful, and
Yeah, the views up there are fantastic.
it's just culturally and naturally, it's just fantastic. But so I think it's all fabulous. I would say you
And they
need.
don't even pay you to say that.
No, honestly, this is just me. It's the best. So
I am so happy that you found something that you could be so passionate about in your second chapter.
yes,
And
thank
I
you.
wish you so much luck and so many tourists coming your way.
It's been
Uh,
so much fun. Thank you very much.